Welcome to the Growth Over Grades podcast, where we talk about education ideas and topics that matter most to our Spaces EDU educator community. My name is Melody McAllister, and I'm your host. I'm also the community advocate for Spaces EDU, and before each episode, I'm going to begin by giving a shout out to one of our community members who is doing amazing things. A couple of weeks ago at the Teach Better conference, I was able to meet Livia Chan. She embodies teaching the whole child/student, and I had the privilege of sitting in one of her sessions where she talked about atomic interactions. Her message is about using every opportunity and interaction with students as a way to grow a deeper connection. So thank you, Livia, for being an awesome educator and leader. In the show notes, you'll find information on how you can follow her if you aren't already doing so. And speaking of amazing educators, episode 8 involves a conversation with educator and leader Claire Romzek. I met her at the NV-Side Silver State Technology Conference in Las Vegas this past September. We immediately clicked when she came into my session, which was focused on teaching the whole child/student. It was just a few people, so we ended up having an amazing conversation and sharing what we have learned and observed throughout our teaching careers. I'm so glad she's going to talk with me today about how we can move our students away from the mindset of, is this for a grade, and to growing through digging into the learning process of becoming a whole person. But first, Claire, how are you doing today? And can you tell us a little bit about your background?
Yeah, I'm doing excellent. We actually had the day off today for Nevada Day. So nice and restful this morning. Recently, I'm pretty excited. I got to sit with a group of people that was at a conference that was hosted by our state superintendent, talking about where they want us to go in the state of Nevada. And we want to kind of move towards competency-based education. So again, teaching the whole child, not just those standards, not just that content, but what do we want our learners to be when they go out into the world, right? We want problem solvers, we want critical thinkers, we want empathetic humans that can not only know the knowledge that we've taught them, but can also relate to people and pass any test, right? Not just the standardized test.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome. I love that you're sharing that. And what is your role in your district?
So I'm the magnet coordinator at my school. So I work to keep the theme of STEM in our school, as well as get guest speakers and field trip opportunities and things like that.
Awesome. And before you were in this role, how many years, or were you an educator in the classroom as well?
Yes, I taught elementary for 12 years. Most of that was 5th grade. And then I moved to the magnet school where I taught design and modeling, which was our first step into the STEM. So all 6th graders take that. And then I moved up to computer science for 7th and 8th graders. And last year I was just 8th grade computer science.
Wow. So that 5th grade teacher connection is always like we find each other, but, even if we've taught other things, that 5th grade teacher, I love that. It's amazing. And I'm so grateful that your path and my path have crossed. And, you and I, we talk about the whole child student, but if somebody was just listening in for the first time, maybe they're a parent, or, maybe even a new teacher, and this is not something that they've ever really thought about. What would you say that it meant?
It means putting a face to the standards, right? So we're not just teaching, can they do this skill, but also how are they doing, right? Like, what are they interested in? If they don't do well writing that essay, what if they gave you another topic? What if there was something they were passionate in? And just trying to connect, I guess, with all of your children to help them grow to be the best they can be.
And I love that. And I'm going to add to that and just say that, the more that I learn about it, because I always thought it was really focused on SEL, but it's more than just that social emotional learning. It's, helping them to grow into their identity, pulling their culture into who they are becoming, and just tying in their physical and mental and emotional, everything about them, along with the community that they're learning in. Like developing a whole child is taking in consideration where our students are coming from and how they're being brought up, and knowing that this isn't just like we're just trying to throw content at them and hope that they soak it up. but that it becomes a part of who they are and that we're helping them grow. And I
Right.
don't think that we realize that. Like, the more that I learn about it, I'm like, there's just so many different components, and that's why it's so amazing. And so, is this a grade? Is this for a grade? This is a question that you and I have faced so much. If we had a nickel for every time we heard this question, I wonder how much money we'd have. A lot,
You'd be rich.
for sure. So why is it so problematic? I mean, other people would be like, that's school. That's what you're supposed to ask.
Right, exactly. And I was getting so annoyed with this question, especially over 2020 when we were online. Is this for a grade? And I couldn't observe my students as much because we were online, right? Their cameras were
Mhm.
off, they were working on things. So I was kind of giving this same test over and over with just our 16 kind of big ideas that where are they at? And it was for me, it wasn't for them, it wasn't for a grade. I just wanted to see where they were at, I was kind of tracking that. And it kept annoying me that they kept asking that, or they would say, can I retake this? Even before they took it the first time, right? And I started to realize that in some conversations later that this wasn't about they weren't going to do it if it wasn't for a grade, because that's the argument I hear. It was more or less, I just got done being grounded because of this other
Mhm.
class's grade. And now I didn't know you were going to give this quiz. And how is that going to affect my grade? And they're constantly playing the game and trying to calculate, is this going to get me in trouble if I don't do well on this? Or I better have a backup plan to tell my parents, when that makes my grade go down. I think
Mm.
we've been so, and I've been guilty of it. We now have grades 24/7. Parents can look at. I've stopped myself from now texting my children, why is this missing right in the middle of the day? Um, and
Mm.
letting them kind
An
of take
arrow
care
to
of it
my heart,
themselves.
Claire. You're convicting me as well.
Yeah, I mean, we've just created this culture of 24/7. We can see grades, so as soon as it gets put in there, we get a notification. We're all over our students or our children, and they're stressed out because is this for a grade? So we've taken it completely away from the learning, and it's just more about that, accountability in
Yeah.
the grade book.
And I love how we've taken it off our students. It's not just annoying because our students ask it, but like literally it worries them. It's about their social emotional development. They don't want to be punished for something. And when I'm thinking about my own middle schoolers and how sometimes they're getting lost in the learning process, things aren't making sense. And no matter what they try, it's still not hitting home. And then they're scared because mom, especially teacher moms, right, are going to be
Mhm.
like, we expect more. And yeah, and I've talked about grounding my own kids, so like I feel like you're taking me to church right now and I need to listen. So thank you. And it's not just something that our kids have developed. We have as a education system have put this onto our students. So I love that you talked about that. And
Right, and
go
I
ahead.
think, um we because of this, we have students and more students that we're hearing those complaints of this child's not doing anything in class.
Mm,
They're doing nothing, right? And I think that some students would rather fail because they did nothing than to have worked hard on something and still get a bad grade. So their
yes.
doing nothing is saving face. And so again, we've created that with this system.
Oh my gosh. I love that. I mean, I hate it, but I love it. You nailed it. Like, students would rather fail than look like they're confused or have to go through that process of
And
like
only
trying to.
fail because I didn't do it. So,
Right. Oh yeah.
I could have done it. We don't know, but yeah.
Yes. And especially as middle schoolers, like that's what I keep thinking about. Yeah, for sure. Thank you for saying that. So when we're talking about like getting away from this, what are some roadblocks that we're facing to get our students and even our parents and teachers away from this attitude of grades, constant grading?
It definitely needs to be a culture shift. That,
Hmm.
like you said, everybody grew up with this. So that's what we're used to. Um, we have started this at my school. Last year, I did ungraded and I piloted
Mm.
it in just my classroom. So I was very honest with the students. I'm trying this out. I let them know there's a whole community on Twitter, hashtag ungrading. So this wasn't just me. And I was taking them on this journey, right? And I checked in constantly with them. And this year, I'm bringing into the ungraded is my CTE team at my school. And some roadblocks are coming from parents who are saying, if it's not graded, they won't do it.
Right.
And so we did have one example of that parent pushback. And at the end of the quarter, when one of our teachers had them reflect on their learning, he called me in and he said, look at this reflection. look at all this kid learned when his mom said he wouldn't do anything if it wasn't for a grade. So I
Wow.
think the roadblocks are perception, but I think to overcome those roadblocks, we just need to try it, and we need to document what we're doing and get the word out that, look, you thought this was going to happen, but it didn't happen. It actually
Right.
has better outcomes than you anticipated.
Right. And you and I talked about this before we went live, but you're talking about the ungrading journey. And I've even talked with people about standards-based or competency-based grading. And if you go back even to the Twitter, you're going to find people at war right now and those different movements. And what do you like? First of all, like, does that surprise you that people are fighting about ungrading versus standards-based grading or competency-based? Do you have any light to shed on that?
I guess it doesn't surprise me because I've been watching it. It
Mhm.
does just make my blood boil. Sometimes I have to put it down. I can't look at the comments, right? It's just what's best for kids, and I think we've taken the humanity out of the learning process, right? We're saying
Yes.
they need to be responsible. They need to get this. They need to have all these A's, or they won't get into high school or the college they want, right? But what are we doing? Are we fostering the whole person? Are we making sure that they're happy as well as learning, and that they're found their passions, and that they can think for themselves, or that they can persevere, right?
Yes.
So instead, we're saying, okay, you failed that test. I guess you're just not going to get a good grade in this class, right? Instead of, hey, what can you do to persevere to correct that and, take those risks and really learn?
Oh God, I love that what you're saying, and totally agree that it's really just about the humanity. So wherever you find yourself, whether you are still giving grades, whether you're standards-based grades, whether you're ungrading, if your focus isn't on the humanity of your students and how they learn, then they're not learning to the best of their capabilities, and we're losing a lot of students in the process. Gosh, I'm so glad you're on here. I think this is a great conversation. And to that too, the wars that we see going on in education, we've got to stick together, people. Like, we're not going to make changes if we're fighting within the system. So yeah.
Right.
And you talked about this already. So this one student, mom said he's not going to do anything if it's not for a grade. How else do you know when you've been successful, like in the ungrading movement or with whatever you're doing?
So, like I said, when I jumped on that journey, I took my kids with me, right? I said, we're trying this out. So I was um, just surveying them throughout the course, right? So
Hmm.
halfway through the quarter, and my quarter grades, because I still had to give grades, right? They were based on their reflections, and we agreed as teacher and child, right? And so there was more work being done in the classroom than me taking work home and giving that feedback on an assignment where it was too late. They couldn't use my feedback to move on to the next step, right? We were very
Right.
project based and things like that. So I was really walking around giving that feedback on the spot with students. And so I could see what they knew. And instead of saying, okay, I sign off on this, you can go on to the next step, I'd say, call me back when you've met my feedback. And so I had a CTE teacher who said, oh, it's just all these reflections and it's so much going on. I said, okay, but how much work are you doing at home? And she's like none. I'm doing it all in class. And I was like, exactly. So we're shifting the work to we're working harder in class where our students are, giving that feedback instead of going home, looking at what they turned in, giving written feedback on something that they're not going back to. They're not going back and looking at that, right? I have
Right.
3 children. They're not all going back and looking at that feedback. Some are, but not all.
That's
So it just
amazing.
shifts.
I'm
It
like, I'm
shifts
like,
the work.
shh,
Mhm.
yes. And I want to say, one of my good friends actually taught with Carrie Fisher. She says it seems like ungrading would help build intrinsic motivation. And yeah, I mean, and I had a lot of intrinsic motivation. You probably have a lot of intrinsic motivation. That's probably what makes us successful in our jobs. But not all of our students are have that intrinsic. Like, that's something that they may acquire later, and especially what we're helping them to develop. So yeah.
Exactly.
And Carrie also says reflection equals metacognition. Yes. Yes, Carrie. I'm so glad you're listening and watching with us. It's like we're jumping off into the higher. So I love what you're saying. Number one, the kids, the students are doing the work and they're actually learning because it's doing deep like reflection. We are not as teachers using like what you're doing. You're not going home working. Everything is happening when you're with your students, and there's a deep level of learning going on, and it's individualized. I'm sure when you look at these reflections, they're not going to be the same.
Definitely. And you think, okay, well, they're going to reflect and everyone's just going to get that A, right? Because they're going to say they're great at something. And that's not the case. And I gave a very generic rubric for them to reflect on for the whole quarter. Okay. Are you still just dipping your toe in the water? Like you're just emerging into this content? Are you still developing your skills? Do you think you're proficient? You're keeping up with everything? I mean, there's been good feedback on all the assignments you've had. Or a 4, I'm exemplary. I can teach somebody else. And so I'd have some reflections where they say, well, I'm only a 3 because I haven't taught anybody else. And it's like, but I think you could. So maybe you didn't have the opportunity, but I've seen what you can do. I've heard your explanations, you're a 4. And so a lot of times I was telling them that they were higher than what they were rating themselves. So they're very honest with
Yeah.
their
It's
reflections. They're not just going to reflect that I'm all knowing. So,
right. And I think and my interaction with students as well, when they grade themselves, they're usually harsher on themselves than we would ever be. So,
right.
and when a student is truthful about where they are in the journey, what how does that translate to a grade? Because you still are responsible to put a grade in the grade book for them. What does that
Mhm.
look like?
So they got the grade that they reflected on and said. So our grades equate to a 1 is like a 60% right in the Dean range, a 2 developing in the C range, a 3 proficiency B, and an A is exemplary number 4, right? And so they rate themselves. And I made promises. This is going to be new for us. I told the parents, um, if they still look like they're going to be emergent by the quarter, I will make a phone call home. So I made
Right.
those promises. I was also sending weekly emails because I was encouraging families to talk. So if you think, well, I don't know if I can't watch that grade go up and down, how will I know? So I'd give little tidbits of like, ask your student about this, or students tell your parents about this. Because if they ask about that and your kid goes, what you talking about? Maybe you want to, reach out to your teacher because maybe they're not where they need to be, right?
Right.
So I think it's all about communication. I feel very strongly that the family, the student, and the teacher are a team. And so teachers also need to help those families know, what can I ask about? What can I be doing to keep up on that without just that notification in the grade book?
Right. Oh, that
And
is
again, and if they got something they didn't want, right? I had to
mhm,
say, okay, that's fine. And I would put it in early, right? You have this whole week to show me evidence that you were at a higher level of proficiency. And
right.
that took a minute for me to say, oh, well, you need to turn this in to show me you get a better grade, right? I had to take those words out and say, if you think you're a higher level of proficiency, show me this evidence.
Yeah. And I can see where like the part of me that loves learning and wants my students to love learning, I see where you're going. But then you look on social media and you see all the parents, and I've done this too about bragging that my kids were straight A students. And you can't say that if they're not straight A, like if they're not at an A level. I mean, no matter what they do. I mean, I can see the struggle with that. I have a question coming in. This is kind of a tough one. Carrie, who is watching, again, amazing educator. Thank you, Carrie. And in the podcast, I'll actually show where you can follow Carrie. She says, "How does ungrading translate to state standardized testing?"
It
That's a
does.
that's a
Because state testing isn't graded. You have a level of proficiency. And so ungraded is a level of proficiency. We're saying you're emergent. Here's the evidence because you did X, Y, and Z on the feedback. There's still activities and tasks to be done. I don't want to say like always assignments. There's still stuff going on in the classroom to show evidence, and they're getting that feedback. So if that feedback is showing I'm not proficient, then you're emergent, just like you would be if you couldn't answer these questions on a standardized test, right? Or you're proficient or you're exemplary. So it absolutely translates, because when you get a 4 on the SBAC, that's not an A, that's an exemplary status.
wow. I love that. And they're probably, do you feel like they're more prepared for those standardized testing because there's more learning happening?
I absolutely do. I think I have said for a very long time, I want to prepare them for the test of life, not a standardized test,
Yes.
right? And so if they're learning, if they can problem solve, if they can persevere, if they can critically think about something, then they're going to be able to pass any test, right? It doesn't matter what state they're in or what test they're given, right?
Hmm.
If you're still emergent because you're not doing anything um, without somebody there helping you, right? Then you're not going to pass the test either. Like it's straightforward. But me giving a test every Friday isn't helping them pass the standardized test either. Because
Right.
where's the feedback? Where am I seeing, oh, you have this hole, I need to fix this to help you understand the next level. We're not
Right.
doing that with our current system either.
I love it. And when you talk about like the grand scheme of life as well, the test of life, academic is just one part of that. It's just one piece of what when we're teaching the whole child, academics is just one part. And regardless of how they perform, you still want them to be able to walk on and be confident in who they are as a person, even more than what they can provide with us academically. And we want it to go hand in hand, but again, we are more than grades. You and I are, our students are. We want that message. It's the growth that's part of it. So thank you for sharing that. Thank you, Carrie, also for continuing to listen. And she says this is perfect for share from Clueless. Argue your grade, show your evidence. Yes, we should bring that clip in. Yes, great
Because
connection.
sometimes students' evidence might not have been what you asked on that quiz, right? Or on that
Right.
assignment. So if they can say, "Wait, I do know how to do this. You just didn't ask me right," then give them that opportunity. I do want to say, like I said, I surveyed my students throughout that whole journey last year, and I have so many quotes, but some from one particular student who is that high flyer. He was always done with everything, exemplary level. It said, I learned more because I tried new things, right? So they didn't just stop at this, okay, I've already got my A, I'm good to go, because what can I do more of? What can I explore? So that was definitely powerful for me too.
Oh my gosh, so powerful. And a lot of times our students that would be at the exemplary level when the class starts, those are the ones that we find it more challenging to keep going because they are so focused on a grade. So that's pretty incredible in itself. I love that. And it's
And
not
they
like,
reflect, sorry to cut you out, they
no,
reflect
go
too
ahead.
on in other classes. This one quote says, not saying I do, but in other classes, they'll calculate, I don't actually have to do that assignment and I'll still be okay.
It's
Right?
true.
Or
Yeah.
they meet the C or they meet the B that they're okay with, and so then they just stop. Like, I'm good with the grade
Mm.
I'm at. I'm not gonna keep going. With an ungraded classroom, without having that there until the end, they're just continually showing evidence of their learning.
And do you feel like your class, when you were taking on this ungrading, like it was more rigorous than it had been?
I saw more people working.
Hmm.
So, in a way, yes.
I know we hate that word, but I mean, it's there.
I know. I know. I do think yes, because I was like we use the design process, so I would check in and before they go on to the next step. And so in that immediate feedback of I'm not going to sign off on this, you can't go to the next step, then I feel like yes, it was that deeper, level to not just,
Hmm.
oh, okay, we turned this in. Now we can goof around for the rest of
Right.
the period because she hasn't graded yet. We don't know,
Hmm.
we
Hmm.
got time or whatever.
For
So
sure. And you've talked about this. Were there other teachers surrounding you that were also in this, journey with you? What does a school community look like when it's not focused on letter grades?
So we're not there yet. I would love a whole school that's not focused on letter grades. I think it looks like kids less stressed out, right?
Mm,
Kids who are more likely to take a risk, more likely to problem solve, learn from mistakes, like be almost happy to have made a mistake. Oh, okay. I didn't do this right. How can I fix it? How can I learn from it? Um, how can I try something new, right? Without the like, "Ooh, I might not get a good grade on this if I take this risk." Be
yeah.
creative, those types of things.
Like the kind of people that will be successful once they leave school as well.
Right.
Yeah. And it's probably going to be like a little bit noisier, classroom, or just you're going to see a lot more movement. Kids are going to be out of their seats and doing things. I don't know. I'm just imagining this, like what it would look like for me.
Well, and I definitely had a coaching culture. I was computer science, so it is a little bit different. But you could have that in math and ELA too, a coaching culture. So, a four is that you could teach somebody else, right? And so if somebody had a question, it freed me up because they're going to somebody else. I don't understand this. I had to, get on students, don't take over their computer. You're coaching them, right? And so you need to explain it. You can't just do it for them. And then I would hear things. So I'd have one student who was coached, and then I'd hear another student who's like, "Oh, I have a problem with this." I was like, "Oh, so and so, you were just coached. You're now the coach for this person because you just had that question answered." And so it was just kind of, yeah, a team of we're
Yeah.
all on the same track. We all want to learn this, and how do we get everybody there instead of a competition,
Right.
right?
Oh my God, I love this. This is great. Um, I love this. And what is one thing what is one thing an educator can do if they are wanting to go this route? Where's the place they can begin?
Try it out.
All
Give
right.
give one assignment that is not going to be graded. Don't tell them. I don't tell them or don't tell them, right? Um, Give the feedback. Give the feedback without the grade and see what happens.
Ooh, give the feedback without a grade and see what happens. I love that. Dr. Michael Harvey joins in and he says, I feel the pain of obsessing about letter grades. Yes, we feel their stress. It's one of the things that we hate about like teaching, I think. And so we're getting close to the end of our podcast, and I appreciate everybody that's joining in live. And then, of course, if you get the replay or you're listening to the podcast and you're not watching the live, but I'd like to ask every educator that comes onto the podcast, and this may have nothing to do with ungrading or anything that we've talked about today, but just maybe what you're experiencing right now in your role in education. What is one piece of wisdom you'd like to share with other educators?
I have a couple. I'm out of the classroom now, but if I was still in the classroom, I'd say, shut your door and teach, right? So there's so much noise outside of policy and what you're supposed to do, and you know what's best in your classroom. And so, yes, you have to follow things, but sometimes you just need to shut your door and teach. And then the other thing in the role that I'm just currently in, and how I spent the last couple of days talking about what's happening in Nevada and the state of Nevada and where we want to go, we need to put the humanity back into
Mm,
education. And, this whole learning loss, I don't jump on that board. They didn't lose their learning. They weren't in school for a year, right? And so we need to look at them as not a number that they should have been, but the fact that we went through something as a whole country, as a whole world, and we need to meet them where they are, right?
oh,
They're
yes.
humans. They didn't lose
Yes.
anything.
Right.
We need to meet them where they are.
And trying to push them where they were pre-pandemic, pre-world crisis is making them feel even more stressed, us more stressed. And when you talk about putting back the humanity in education, it's for all of us, for our students, for our teachers, for our leaders, speaking on our behalf as teachers in the classroom. I love that. We have a comment coming in. Um, Dr. Harvey also says our English department has removed grades for juniors. Ooh, okay.
And that
Wow.
makes me so happy because my number one argument I hear all the time is we can't change because high school does this, or we can't change because college. And so, no, we need to make a change. And as our students go through that change, maybe they'll help
Mhm.
to motivate change in the higher levels as well.
Right, right. Well, thank you so much, Claire, for coming onto our show. I'm actually
Thank
going
you
to
for
flash
having
on
me.
the screen where you can find Claire. Let me see if I can actually hit the right button. But you can find her on Twitter at Claire Romzek. And so I hope that you will follow her. She's a wealth of information. Is there any other place on social media that you want to that people can find you?
Not really. That's the place I go for all my educational inspiration.
Awesome. And let's keep this conversation going. Please, you are invited if you're an educator and you care about growth over grades. I want to invite you to our Facebook community, facebook.com/groups/spaces.edu. And I've just started one on Twitter, and that will all be on our show notes. But thank you again for joining in. I appreciate everybody who joined in live. Claire, thank you for taking some time, even on your day off, to talk with me. I absolutely love everything that you talk about is putting the humanity back into education. And that is so important right now. So thank you so much. I've had a great time with you, and we'll see you on the web and see you in the community. Bye,
Thank you so much.
everybody.